Alright, so my brother and I have this kind of ongoing thing where we just kind of tease each other whenever we get the chance, just for the hell of it, because that's what we do. Yeah, I've talked a lot about how we've been, like, he's been my greatest ally all throughout my life. So even in the times, like with the family situation where I got othered and he could see it, he could see where I was used as a scapegoat, where I was the not favorite in the family, because especially when it came to the two of us, right? So he was the one that was acceptable as far as my grandparents went, and for various reasons, I was not, and I was the scapegoat. So when we were little, like that was the big thing. Like my grandparents moved back to Indiana from Oklahoma when I was 8, and I've talked a lot about those those stories. But the biggest thing was it became this thing where, of course, since I was a scapegoat, we were constantly made aware of all the ways he was good and acceptable and all the ways that I was bad, right? And, we might not have talked about it as much back then. It definitely played out at some points in time. I think the worst was middle school and early high school for me. Middle school was rough for him too, but it's like when the time frame that we didn't get along was more so when I was in middle school and early high school. And I think I saw a quote by Jay Shetty a while back that was talking about jealousy comes in, or most people aren't even aware or don't even have the sense of jealousy because they weren't raised in environments where you had to earn love and affection. And it's like, that actually makes perfect sense. And especially in that time frame, since I was the scapegoat, why I ended up kind of lashing out at him for a while because, I was I was the one that was the problem, and he was the favored of the grandkids and all that. And of course, it was just the two of us as far as our immediate group. Well, on my mom's side, which was the side that we were basically raised to believe was the only acceptable one. So, even like that dynamic, we were essentially raised to hate this other part of ourselves because my mom's side of the family was always talking down about my dad's side of the family for various reasons. My brother was acceptable because he was into sports like my mom's parents were, and I was the one that was more into music, even though my brother played guitar for a while, so it's not that he wasn't into music, but he didn't do the band stuff like I did. So it was kind of like lesser into music, I guess. But because he had these different things that made him acceptable on my mom's side, and I think namely, that he was the firstborn grandchild, but also since he was a boy, that was a big key feature in it. And because he was supposed to essentially continue the toxicity, the toxic masculine way of being, which was actually something that didn't work out on that end because, I've talked a lot about how he was also emotionally manipulated in a whole lot of ways as well, to make him also be what they thought he was supposed to be, right? Or what was acceptable for him to be. So we both had this whole this really big sense of how fucked up everything was. And yet, that was just the life we knew. So, anyway, point is, last night, or even before last night, okay, my brother is in the process of getting ready to move to Oklahoma with his family. His wife's been there for a couple months, and he's been waiting on the sale of the house to go through because they're waiting on their house to sell before they can buy the house they want in Oklahoma. And she's staying with her brother, and he doesn't want their dog staying with them, so it's like, for simplicity's sake, it's easier for my brother and their daughter and their dogs to stay here until the house is sold and, you know, they're ready to go through with the purchase of the house that they want. Anyway, so he's been on packing duty by himself for the most part. And the other day he was over very briefly. Gracie almost had a sleepover the other night, and then decided when she found out she was going to have to get up early so her dad could pick her up, so she would be available for a little case management meeting for her autism services and whatnot. She didn't want to be she wanted to sleep through it. She didn't want to be bothered by the meeting or whatnot, so she didn't want to have to get up early, so she had to be there. So she wanted to go home so she could sleep through it. And, you know, while her dad was there to pick her up, you know, he sits down to visit for a while, and then my mom's sitting at the table, and then I'm just kind of standing there. I had been getting ready to go to bed, and then my dogs started barking because they heard him come in, so I went back in there and then was kind of visiting for a little bit. And my mom made this big deal about how he should ask me to help him with his packing. And I have told him several times, if he needs assistance, let me know. It's like, I'm not really doing a whole lot, so I can help. When she brought it up, the aggravation we have with our mother bringing it up is she feels the need to insert herself into the thing so that she can feel like you're too stupid to have figured it out on your own. You know, so she kept trying to push me in the direction of going over there. It's like, well, I told him I would help him. He knows, you know, and then part of that issue is he's also a bit stubborn when it comes to that, and doesn't like to ask for help. So there is that whole ordeal or issue too. But I was just kind of riding it out to see what he would do. And of course, as time's been going down, he gets some stuff done, and then he gets sidetracked with his ADHD, and then he's like playing games on his phone or mindlessly scrolling because just, you know, there's so much that he's still got to do, and he's not able to focus on it real well. So, you know, I've been going over there and seeing his tendency to stop for the distractions, and it's like, you sure you're not going to ask for help? Because they've had this, it's not a pod, but it's something similar, where it's this empty crate that they get to fill, and then they are having their stuff shipped to the next location, right? And when the sale of the house was supposed to go through over the weekend, it seemed like a better idea. And then, you know, my sister-in-law came up from Oklahoma and was going to, you know, they were going to get everything packed and then all drive back to Oklahoma together. Then the sale didn't go through. And then, it just got pushed back, and it's the people, not the people that want to buy their house, but the people that are buying those people's house had some kind of glitch. And so my sister-in-law went back and had to take the car back because she's working out there and needs it to get to work. And while they're up here, my brother's been borrowing one of the vehicles that our parents have. And, you know, sometimes we have to shuffle things, but it's all right. But yeah, so she was talking about all the stuff she was there. She would have him. They were gonna have it done. They didn't have it done. She left, and they had the car completely as loaded as they could possibly get it, but they still had a whole lot to go and weren't doing on that end, right? So anyway, so it comes up or when my brother's over there to pick Gracie up, that, you know, my mom says that I'm really good at packing and he should ask for my help. And she said, I'm really good at packing too. And I just said, yeah, but I'm better. You know, just kind of harass him. Although it's not entirely wrong, as we discovered last night. So last night, okay, I had a movie that I wanted to watch. I got several from the library, and I've been usually when I get them from the library, you know, I'll have them for like 3 weeks and then only watch like 1 or 2 of them, even though I had like 7. And I've been trying to get caught up. I mean, I guess, but it's not like I'm really behind on anything. It's just I didn't really get into horror movies until more recently. I was always into like psychological thrillers and whatnot, but like actual horror movies, I'm trying to get to figure out the allure of those and all this fun stuff. And, you know, just the things that it was basically discouraged from having anything to do with, just for conditioning purposes, conditioned to think it was bad or whatever. So I went along with it for a long time, and now it's kind of, because I was conditioned to not be able to watch these things or not, not know what was going on in this whole area of creativity. Now I'm making up for lost time, basically. So I told him, it's like, look, I had 3 of the Friday the 13th movies, and I watched 2 over the weekend, and then I was like, I have the 3rd. The reason I wanted to watch it then was it was due yesterday, so I watched it before I took it back, but also because I have to go to the Greenfield Library to get a lot of the movies, because the one closer to us doesn't have as many, so, you know, bigger, more stuff, all that. So I don't go over there all the time to Greenfield, to that library, but if there's something specific that I want to get, then I will. And I don't know what of the Friday the 13th movies this one has, but I know, like, for the Halloween movies, it doesn't have like the original ones. So I had gotten those from the library, or from the Greenfield Library as well, but I was in Friday the 13th mode this time around, so whatever. Anyway, that's not really relevant. I watched it before I went over there. I dropped the movie off at the library at like 8:15, which already, it's after library hours. They closed at 8, but since I turned it in that day still, I'm not gonna get a fine this time. I just paid like the $270 fine that I had because I keep missing the emails, because there's so much junk in my email anymore. And yeah, so I had some fines. I finally paid those the other day. But yeah, I said after that I'll be available to help. When I went over there, he'd been working, but he was sitting outside. Of course, it's hot as fuck, and you know, he's sweating, but also playing his game on his phone because he had to take a break, and then just kind of wandered off for a while. So when I got there, he already got a lot of the big stuff loaded, and I think that... Okay, hold that thought. He had the big stuff loaded, like the hutch. He moved that by himself, which I was expecting to help with that kind of thing, because some things are easier to move with 2 people, right? So, yeah. He had a bunch of stuff like that. He got the other big heavy-duty rack that they had in their garage with like their Christmas stuff and whatnot on it. I helped him with the first one, get it loaded, and it was when we loaded it, it was so we could see how much space we had to work with, was the big reason we put that in there when we did, because that was like right after my sister-in-law got there. And it took a bunch of space. And I was thinking, there's no way they're going to get all their shit in here. You know, and they kept trying to be optimistic about it, but it's like, that's not going to happen. But we worked with what we had, and there were a couple little side projects that ended up getting, so the first one, he took the couch apart. They have one of those love sack couches, and it comes like completely apart. And it's actually kind of handy because like the cushions fit into the base of the seat. So it's like, that's handy. It's like, I didn't realize it was going to break down this much. I was trying to figure out how we were going to stack it with like all the pieces together, but like the backs are off, the cushions stuffed into the bottom of the seat and all this stuff. So it's like, this is very handy. It still wasn't going to work. But he took it apart so we could kind of start working with it in the truck, right? And it was a whole ordeal. And of course, he's got like 8 individual seats on it, and then the back pieces, the armrest pieces, and then of course there are the feet that also come off. And he's got like, I don't even know how many of those damn things there were. I was trying to count the little pegs that there were, but like the pegs were not the same as the feet, because there was like an actual like a square, it's bigger than this, but there's like a square thing that I think some of the pegs screwed into for each thing. So there's a whole lot of pieces. It broke down nicely, but there was still a whole lot of it, and it was still really heavy. So we start loading some of that. He has this idea of, Jen wants to take the rugs, so here's this spot where it seems like that would be a good spot for the rugs. Well, put the rug in there, and it smelled like dog pee. It's like, oh boy. And, at first we're thinking, we gotta have this thing completely packed by today. And, so we're just kind of like, oh shit, and he finally stops and, calls his wife, and they talk for a little bit. And she's asking him if he cleaned the carpet before it went in there and all this stuff. It's like, no. And, he's talking about how he's really sure it's not going to all fit. And so they're talking about like renting another truck for like the trip to Oklahoma. Now, they had talked to me about going with him next week when he goes to take the kid and the dogs and the remainder of the stuff out there. And so that's the plan right now. We're going to take the Edge, but then we're still kind of thinking, it's like, we're looking at all this stuff that still has to be packed. It's like, oh man, it's like, I don't think this is going to work. So they're talking about what things can go into the shipping container that will be brought out to them in a couple weeks. And they have like a ton of clothes each, so, they have enough that they're keeping out. So there's still a bunch that can go in this storage thing for however long while they're waiting on the thing to come around, right? And at first my sister-in-law starts looking at like box trucks, and she's thinking something that he can drive my niece and the dogs in, so then I don't have to worry about going out with them, since he's got all this stuff that he's going to have to haul. And it's like, I feel like I still probably need to go to help on this whole thing. So, so then we were thinking about, he would drive the box truck, I would drive the Edge, and, I would just like follow him out there. But it's like, that kind of partly defeats the purpose, because part of the purpose of me going is to, be available to drive if he needs to take a nap, or to, talk to keep him from dozing off or whatever, or, that kind of thing. So it's like, if we're in two different vehicles, then we're both having to drive the whole time, and yeah. So that brings us back to an issue, right? So yes, I'm going, but then that would kind of somewhat defeat the purpose if we're in separate vehicles, except for the fact that he's not going to be able to have two big dogs and a kid in the box truck with him and not have any issues. I know, because when I was helping my aunt and uncle move the rest of my cousin's stuff out of his last apartment, I was driving the box truck, and that was something that I was thinking about. And I was sitting there in the truck driving, and it was like, there's no way I could just get a box truck and, haul all my stuff to wherever I moved to, because like my dogs wouldn't fit that way inside that way. And it's like, how would I make that work, right? So it's like, having that reference point, it's like, yeah, that's not going to work with a 50-pound Basset Hound and a 70-pound Schnoodle. It's not going to work. So, yeah, so it's like, I would still need to go to have the other vehicle for the dog and the kid, or dogs and the kid. So yeah. Anyway, so there's more things that got tossed in. My brother was working on, packing up more of the stuff in the house and bringing big containers of stuff down to be loaded in the shipping thing. And while he was doing that, I was in there cramming things, as I do. I'm really good at packing things when they're like, okay, like the furniture is loaded, packing things into the furniture. So like, he had the hutch with the doors saran wrapped. I mean, with heavy duty saran wrap, but and I was looking at it, it's like, there's nothing in here. He's like, no. I said, why would you not put like stuffed animals in here? I said, because that's something that is not going to get broken, and it will kind of cush the the glass on the hutch a little bit, give it a little bit of protection, so it's not just like getting jarred by the trip and all that stuff. So he's like, you're gonna open this, aren't you? I was like, I'm just gonna open enough to be able to cram things in there. Yes, I am. And I did. And so I was like shoving, she had a bunch of these big Squishmallow things. And it's like, that's perfect, because those things squish down too, and so they kind of super squishy, and you get a bunch of them in there. Got a bunch of them in there. And it used the space. And Gracie's stuffed animals went somewhere, right? So he's got like this box of stuffed animals that he had tape on and everything, and it's like, yeah, that's not gonna go like that. So we have these two storage racks for like totes and whatnot, and he had some of them on. It's like, all right, he had like part of it loaded toward the back, and it's like, okay. I said, before we go any further, because he had like some other stuff that was across the back of it, I said, before we go any further, we need to cram stuff in these little spaces. And he was like, okay, but then he got sidetracked with the other project, and I was working on that. And like, at first it was kind of hard to know where to start, because I didn't know if there's going to be stuff that wasn't able to make it in that truck, or in that thing. Was there certain things that we're going to want access to sooner than later, if we, if this other truck situation hadn't come around, or needed to come around rather. And yeah, so I was like cramming things as much as I could. I said, "Where are your towels?" And he said he had a tote that had the towels in them. It's like, we're not doing that. So I went and grabbed the totes that had towels and blankets in them, and I was like using them to wrap the picture frames and stuff to keep those from getting broken, but also be able to slide them under like the racks at the bottom shelf. There was plenty of space for like pictures, stuff like that. And so I was trying to do that, and he was, worried about getting the bigger stuff and all that fun stuff. And of course he stopped to take the couch apart, and then we come to find out that it's like that there's no way we're going to be able to fit this in there. But also, since you're still going to be here another week, it would be really helpful to have some kind of furniture. So I had gone to the storage unit and brought Gracie's mattress back. They gave it to me, but to help them out, I moved it out of the house while they were at their chiropractor appointments the other day when Jen was in town. And after I already had them over there and wrapped up in the plastic, I got a message saying, or actually when they got back, my brother said, "Hold off on taking the mattress," and I said, "Too late, what's going on?" And that was when they found out that the sale had a minor snag again, and it's still in process, but it's like all these like things that just keep getting held up for a brief time. But anyway, at one point we were kind of taking a little hiatus and talking about, the family things, the moving stuff and all this stuff. And he said, of course this is something I've talked about on here quite a bit too. He said he feels like I'm the one that got this whole thing started, like as far as I started pointing out the things that weren't good, like with our family and the lack of boundary issues and, calling them out for what they were. And of course, as a reminder, when I started calling stuff out like that, he had a job or an issue with a job that he had and a boss, and ended up having to leave that job for a while. And it's one of those, it was a big mental health trigger. It's basically the thing. When I started setting boundaries and started noticing all these different things with like toxic things that were going on within our family situation, I started telling him about him. I started about what I was noticing. I started trying to give him things to help him figure out, to help him set boundaries, right? To help him protect his own energy, right? So I had learned that, like the rocks help. So I started giving him some rocks and stuff, and they worked for him too, right? So like the more I was doing to kind of try to help him disconnect from that toxicity in the family, he started noticing a lot more. And part of the conversation that we had last night was when he said he really doesn't feel like he had, or like he was abused in his childhood, but then when he was going through the group therapy program that he had to after the whole work situation malfunction and all that, he said those times where somebody says something and you just have to say something like right then because it's just that like big thought that comes up. And he said that the therapist of the group, dudes, I think that was my falcon. And I'm really sad that he flew off because I was like, just had this moment. I wanted to flip my camera around. Anyway, he already took off. So he said he was in this therapy group, and the therapist said something, and it was one of those things, and he just like stopped, and he just all at once blurts out, "I'm a dick." And the therapist is like, "Wait, what?" And wants more information on that, because obviously he had something to say about it. And he was, he's talking about, the way he's treated his wife or ex-girlfriends or just friends in general, that he realized were not ideal. We'll just roll with that. And of course the therapist, was talking to him. He said what she said was the stuff that he was talking about, and even his mannerisms and thought process on things is very much aligned with somebody who was in an emotionally and psychologically abusive situation. And that's something that I've been telling him as I've been figuring this stuff out too. And he said last night, he really doesn't feel like he can say that he was, raised in an abusive environment. And I said that I feel like part of that is one of those things that he's going to need to come to terms with, that it was actually abusive, because otherwise he's still going to hold these little ideas where he tends to gaslight him. He ends up gaslighting himself in various ways because he doesn't want to call it what it is. It's like, at the end of the day, it was emotionally and psychologically abusive, and that, like, that's just all there is to it. I said, until you're able to accept that and then heal that aspect of it, it's going to be something that, like, if you're in denial about it, it's still going to be there. It's just you not facing it fully. It's just another layer of processing out what it was, to be free of it and to be able to move on and have a healthy life outside of, the fact that we had a emotionally and psychologically abusive upbringing. And he said, like, one of the things he says pretty regularly is that he feels that I started it, as far as the healing stuff, but then that he's had to really step up on, I can't remember how he worded it exactly. I started it with calling things out, but then as he's seen it, then that was basically, as he started seeing it more and more, he started realizing that he's not going to be able to raise his daughter the way he wants to raise her while he's still ass deep in the environment, the home environment, 3333, that, that got us to this point of, being in our early to mid 40s and feeling like we've done so little in our lives because we weren't raised to have lives. And he said, me and his wife both have, because his wife's been calling stuff out the entire time they've been together, and he's just not seen it, right? But then when I started calling it out, and because we had the shared space growing up, and like we were always each other's biggest allies, except for the time frames where there was the jealousy issue, because essentially we had to compete for affection, and there too, he was the favorite one, so he didn't have to compete as much with me as much as I had to compete with him, or at least, yeah, I think that's a fair way to say it. I had to compete with him in order to get any kind of emotional validation, any of it, right? He was automatically accepted because he was a grandson and he was into sports, so he had those right things. But then also, I was the one that was into the not. First off, I was the granddaughter, so it's like the first granddaughter, second grandchild, but immediately they were trying to control all aspects of me, right? So the scapegoat and all that stuff. It's like my brother and I have had that conversation a lot where, I have said a lot about, or talked to him a lot about the fact that he was the favorite, and he's always known that and seen it as well, but then not known what to do with it. He didn't like it. He didn't appreciate the fact that, he was so obviously preferred over me. But at the same time, there wasn't really anything he could do about it because he was very much getting emotionally and psychologically manipulated as well, right? So it's like one of the things that I keep telling him, because he keeps talking about how, the good parts of our parents and seeing them the way they are now. I said, but what you're seeing isn't, or what you've been seeing hasn't been the good in them. It's the good that was in us, that we were basically, as we set boundaries, it like stopped them having access to our energy. So when they stopped being able to suck the life out of us in, the ways that they've been doing that throughout over the years, basically they're just having to face the fact that there's lots of ugly behavior there, right? And like what they're seeing is just like an amplification because we're not muting their negativity anymore. And when we didn't have boundaries, that's how they were able to suck the life out of us, because we were still trying to see the good in them when what we were actually seeing was a reflection of us and what we wanted to see in the world, to have in the world. But without being latched onto our energy, they're unable to put out in the world on their own. There's somebody walking over here. Hold on. Okay, they're over there. But yeah, it's like the good that we were always kind of superimposing over the situations, like that was what we wanted to see. So it's like they were benefiting from the fact that we wanted to see the goodness in the world, and we wanted to have the good family existence and whatnot. But it's like without us seeing things in that light, when we stepped back, pulled our energy back, and started seeing things for how they are, that's something like the rest of the family is unable to, they're unable to keep living in that illusionary space because that's not what they have inside, right? So because they are so fixated on the negativity and everything, like my dad wants to, both of them, they spend all their time watching like political bullshit and religious bullshit and, using it. Basically, it's a thing that is basically a weapon against us, honestly. Because it's stuff that's talking about, all the ways that, religion in and of itself is just shit talking over everybody, so you can't do anything better than what you've always done, or and all that. So yeah. Anyway, when we were having this conversation last night, he's like, I agree. I see that. And, he's still struggling with that point. It's like he sees it and he understands it, yet at the same time, there's something blocking him from being fully able to accept that. And I told him I think that's part of, where that inability to call it out as, emotional and psychological abuse, the inability to do that is how you keep yourself trapped, because you're still having a hard time really accepting and understanding that point that that what you saw and what you believed growing up was a little bit of an illusion. But they're not actually capable of the good that you saw superimposed over the top of them, because it's been essentially a reflection of what you're putting out there. So anyway, like I was thinking, going along with both the packing aspect of it and also like the masculine and feminine roles. One of the things that I said to him in this conversation was, he called out that, or he pointed out that he feels like I started it, but then once I started talking about it, then he started seeing it. It's like, I said, no, that's exactly the point. That's exactly how this works. It's like, I start noticing things, and then I start, pointing his attention in that direction, and then he starts looking at it and really realizing what is going on and how much is going on, and it's always been going on, and then he's able to bring it into the physical. I've talked a lot about like the divine masculine, divine feminine roles and whatnot, and it's like, this is a prime example of that. It's like taking turns and basically leapfrogging in a way. So I do this work, and then when I have to stop and kind of take a break from it for a little while, then he's got work that he's doing on that end. And it's like, one of the biggest things that I've noticed with our connection is very much that it's like, I have to see it first, but once I see it and start running my mouth about it, which there again is why why the system very much does not want women speaking, because that's where change starts coming in. Because once we start calling it out, then like calling out the toxicity, once the masculines start seeing that, they're the ones that are kind of grounding it into this physical existence. So I've talked a lot about how the divine masculine rules over the lower three chakras, which is the root, sacral, and solar plexus, and the feminine rules over the upper three chakras, which is the crown, third eye, and throat. Yeah, throat. That's why. That's what we're supposed to be. This is how it works. We start speaking from what we're seeing because of having the access in the upper chakras, and we unite in the heart space, right? So I call it out, and then he kind of grounds it into this existence. So it's like, I was unable to think about leaving at all by myself. I was unable to have any kind of dreams for myself. I wasn't raised to do that. So once, he's got his family and all this stuff. So once they started, once he started seeing what I was talking about and knowing that he can't raise his daughter the way he wants to, so long as he's so closely connected to this toxic family situation, then he's moving, right? He's making it happen where he can get the fuck up out of here so he can raise his kid how he wants to without our parents in the middle of it. Parents and grandparents, all of them. But then since I'm unable to really, unable to really figure out how to move forward in light of this information, it's don't know how to explain it, because it's like him embracing the fact that he needs to move to be able to have a better existence. He and his wife told me back in December that when they leave, I would be more than welcome to go with them. It's like that was the thing that first gave me an inkling of hope that there was a possibility for me to get out of this situation, right? So it's like, okay, now 42 years old and still living with my parents. That's not ideal. And it's not still, it's returned, still from when I moved back in 2019, but still, it's like before they extended the invitation, I wasn't able to have any kind of idea. It's like what I would want. It's like, where would I go if I could go anywhere? And it's like I had these things that would pop up. I've talked about like the tarot readings that I've watched along the way. I know Kino Tarot and ESO Tarot are two that have mentioned it. I think Gem Goddess also talked about like there's something about Philadelphia or something about Pennsylvania. And then, as I heard those, it mentioned in those spaces multiple times, and it's like, okay, so Pennsylvania, but where would I go? But then, then I found myself looking at, little random things that have come up along the line. Like when I was with my ex, one of our early dates, we went to Penn Station, and I got a Philly cheesesteak for the first time. And oh my God, I loved it so much. And now it's like one of my go-to sandwiches at a lot of places that we've gone. And, like those, when we were in Alabama, even found several places that had good ones that I absolutely loved. And that was like my go-to sandwich. It still is. But that was 2012. And, I talked about like the puzzle that my aunt gave me, and she was all excited about it. And for a while I was like, okay, I don't really get the excitement about it. But then after I start thinking about where would I go, I realized it is a scene from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's like, oh, so it's like these things that have been popping up along the way that it's like, it's always been there kind of dancing around me. Got really into the song Motown Philly after it came out. Of course, Fresh Prince talks about it in the theme song. But I suddenly realized it's like there are all these little things where it's kind of, once I set out to figure out where I could go, then I realized that's another thing that's been dancing around me my entire life. So it's like, okay, so there's something there. And then the more that I've thought about it, it's like, there's definitely something there. And I feel like I've had another life there, and I feel like I'm supposed to end up there at some point, whether it's for good or just for a, just passing through. I don't know. I just feel like that's a potential now, right? But that wasn't a potential before they said if they move, I could go with them. Then it's like, okay, now I at least have the opening to consider what would I do, where would I go? And of course, it didn't work out on that. And I mentioned it to my brother, and I said I feel like I'm going to end up there someday. And he started talking about how much he loves it out there, because they've gone there on a couple day trips and whatnot, or I guess overnight. It wasn't long. They like disappearing for the weekend and coming back, or for the day, whatever. I feel like that one has to have an overnight if you're going to really appreciate it as all the way. But even when I first started trying to figure out where I would go on that end, the idea had come to me, and then before I even mentioned it to him, I don't even remember how it came up exactly, but I was there at their house, And then I happened to look over, and he's got a Philadelphia Eagles hat on the counter, and it's like, interesting. And I said then, I was like, have you ever considered Philadelphia? I said, because I said I keep getting these signs that seem to be pointing in that direction. And he said he hadn't, but he was intrigued by the possibility. Of course, they're going to Oklahoma, so obviously that didn't work out. But it's like, he said he'd mention it to his wife and try to stay open to it. It's like, well, it's like, if it happens, by all means, if they go out there, that I would absolutely go out there with them. Otherwise, I feel like there's nothing in Oklahoma for me except for my brother and his family. So, yeah. But they've been there before too, so it's like, yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it's like this live demonstration of how the two aspects work together, and all the connections that I have, like I've talked about how I've always felt extra protective of the good guys, and what did that look like for me? It was those guys that, like my brother, who go out of their way to not make things harder for other people to exist, and often seem to get shat on by the world anyway. And as I've come, been making sense of like this whole, the twin flame thing, and realizing that the two aspects, very complementary, and, as far as everything is connected. So like all the work that I'm doing, I share it with him, and then he's realizing other stuff, and then he's making moves in the physical that kind of, solidify the thing that needs to change and helps to bring the change, right? So it's like, it's like I see it, but I can't do anything about it. It's like, fuck. But then part of that is because I was raised to over-identify with the fact that, I was born in the feminine packaging, and I took on the conditioning of all the things that were telling me what it had to look like for me to be female in this world. It's like I over-identified with the feminine aspect of myself, and was looking for needing somebody outside of myself to save me and all this stuff, and couldn't do the things because I was unable for whatever reason. And that was, that too, because I over-identified with the feminine aspect of myself. It's like I completely neglected the masculine, action-oriented side of myself that can take steps to bring change for my life. So, like the whole twin flame thing is the only reason I figured any of this out. And, what that's looked like is, so I'm suddenly made aware of this connection, and then I realized that he had to be in the spotlight so I could find him, but then how was he ever going to find me if I didn't do more than what I'd ever done? So that started me on the whole YouTube thing, which was kind of mind-blowing, I guess. I've talked a lot about, I didn't know what it was supposed to be or what I was supposed to do. I just knew I was supposed to do it. So one day I had to stop. I was skating, and I got this idea that I was going to stop and sit on this rock and do a little quick video and just talk about whatever. And then it ended up becoming this thing where it's been my healing process talked through. And that's what's giving me the stuff that I'm sharing with my brother, is because I'm talking through it in this space, making connections for myself. Then I'm able to share those connections with him, and then he's able to, kind of reconcile those within himself as well. And it's like just a back and forth. It's like I took the action and started the channel. And, I've talked about I didn't do very much before I had to take a break from it and step back, because I had to make space for the fact that I already expanded so far beyond what I thought I was capable of in doing the thing, because I was very much taught that, my existence was supposed to be just so other people could suck the life out of me. And to start taking initiative on something just because I felt the intuitive hit that I needed to, has been life-changing, like literally. But yeah, 5. I've talked a lot about like this version of me doesn't exist without like this twin flame connection existing, because it's the thing that has required me to step out of my shell. It's like, especially, the all my Cancer placements, Cancer, it's the crab, led by the moon, so that emotional, flowy, goodness, and tendency to turn in and hide. So that was always, when things got hard or scary, I'd hide. But then the twin flame thing came up, and it's like, now you can't hide anymore. Now you got to start doing stuff. And as I've started to do that, and as I've started to heal, it's like, this isn't so bad. I think last time I looked, I was at like 255 videos. Of course, I did 2 shorts now, so those are included in that. But yeah. Even that was something else that, I felt the other day like I needed to do a short and a reel for Instagram. And it was terrifying. And I had a really hard time posting them, because I've done 2 now. Going through with it, getting it posted, and actually having it out there. Because of course people are more inclined to watch the short things than they are these hour to an hour and a half, or to 2 hours even, videos of me talking. And I've talked about how that's also been a way that I've been protecting myself, because the people that I wouldn't want to have access to the deeper levels of me are usually the ones that are going to fall off in the first little bit. It's like if somebody chooses to watch the entire video, there's a reason, right? So they're not just falling off, or they're not just those that they're not going to watch an hour and a half long video simply for the sake of bullying me, right? But there have been bullies that popped up, but I'm pretty confident they probably chime in after 5 minutes or less, and simply for the purpose of trying to kick me so I don't keep going, right? So, like the one person that I've talked about on here that, I was livid when that whole thing came up. She was talking about being so sick and tired of hearing people and their sob stories. It's like, that is a prime example of somebody that has had an aspect of themselves abused, and they're, hurt people. It's like they've also had this thing where they've been hurt in various ways, and their means of protecting themselves, I think, is to lash out at those who are trying to do something, right? So like there's a whole move in the church now where they're trying to demonize empathy, and that's something that they've tried to demonize in men and boys for a long time, right? So because if they can block them from having any empathy and from finding common ground with other people, then the toxic types are able to stay in power, right? So the good guys are the ones that are or have been kicked for having empathy, for being at all in tune with their with the feminine aspect of emotion, because it's all about the feelings and the flowy crap. So so because the toxic types are trying to keep them from rising in their power as well, right? So we all have to do it together, right? Masculine and feminine, and that doesn't matter what packaging you come in, because we have to unite the aspects of ourselves first. And so when I started the channel, started following through on the intuitive hits, like the doing the shorts and all that stuff, the taking action side is the masculine, right? So that's an aspect of me that, since I was so over-identified with the feminine aspect of myself all my life, that, oh my God, there was like a whole death of an old way of being just in starting my channel, right? Especially, I didn't know what I was doing with it. I just had this simple thought that he had to be in a spotlight. The twin flame had to be in a spotlight so I could find him, but how was he ever going to find me if I didn't start doing more than I'd ever done? And what I'd always done was go into hiding anytime things got hard or scary, because I didn't think I was strong enough to be able to do more than that. On that note, let's see what time it is. It is 6:30, and we're supposed to have a bonfire. Gracie wanted a bonfire before she leaves for Oklahoma, and tonight was the night that's happening. Now, I don't know if I think my brother is going to bring her and her friend's, kind of living with them at the moment. They're trying to get all the time together that they have while they have the opportunity before Gracie moves. So he'll probably bring both of them over, so long as they want to come. So we'll see how that goes. The other little detail on going back to the packing, the thing that I was also really sank in with me, it's like my brother can pack stuff, like he loads the big heavy stuff and moves that kind of stuff, but then it's like it's like beyond that he was kind of struggling, and he said he didn't realize how much he hadn't done until I got there to help him with the stuff that he had done, and beyond that. And then he was really kind of aggravated. He said as much as he's gotten rid of and already had packed, he felt like he hadn't done anything. It's like, but I feel like that's a part of this whole the counterparts aspect, is because he's moving the big heavy stuff, but then I am able to see it differently enough to cram smaller things in the little holes so more stuff gets packed, right? So there's no sense in having a box of stuffed animals when stuffed animals squish and fit in little crevices. So it's like, even like just the difference on packing and the mentality behind that too. It's like that whole thing's kind of just interesting to see it play out. But yeah, on that note, I'm going to wrap this up and go check in for that and see if they are there yet and all that fun stuff, and have my dogs under control whenever they do get there. So, as always, I appreciate you. Until the next time, see ya.